Welcome to Miss Gershon's second video about plant reproduction. In the last video, we went over the parts of the flower. To review, we have our flower, the seed, which is part of what helps the plant reproduce. We have the stem, which holds it up as well as transports the water and the nutrients from the soil above. The leaf, which is where our photosynthesis and the food is made. The term bud is when we see a flower just beginning to bloom. Down here is where we have the roots that not just hold the plant in place, but also absorb the water and the nutrients from the ground up the stem to feed the flower and the plant. And then from here, we discussed inside the flower the different body parts, flower parts, and plants have different ways of reproducing. In this case, we're only focusing on the reproduction of flowering plants. Again, you'll start hearing other terms about reproduction in plants, but when referring to flowering plants, so in a flowering plant, the reproduction is done through the male and the female parts of the flower. The female part calling the pistil. Our pistil is this green area here. We have the stigma, which sits at the very top. We have the style, we have the ovary, and we have the oval. Inside the ovary is where kind of like the baby seeds are. They are not made seeds until they have been fertilized through the male part, the stamen. So the stamen has the filament, which is like these long, skinny green parts here that kind of hold it up. And then at the top is where we have the anther. The anther is where the pollen is going to sit. Now, the pollen is important for the reproduction process. So we're going to be talking about, well, how does the pollen get to our pistil, the female part, which will later create the seed? So, pollination. So, pollination is needed to make seeds. Again, this is our reproduction. It is needed to make the seeds. Reviewing the flower, and a flowering plant has a male and a female structure, those who have to work together in order to produce the seeds. Pollen is transported from our stamen to the pistil in a variety of ways. Some of the ways that the pollen is transported from here to here, because remember, flowers don't have hands, they can't do it themselves. They're transported using wind. For instance, wind will blow, it'll pick the pollen up, the pollen will float all around. Just because the pollen is here doesn't mean it's going to land on this flower. That pollen created by this flower can land all over in different areas. So it can land on a flower right next to this flower, or it can land on a flower far, far away. So winds might blow, and if you've ever gone out and like my allergies were really bad when I woke up this morning because we're in spring where there's more and more flowers. So those allergies, kind of a lot of people talk about, is because there's pollen all around. If you go outside and you see like a layer of yellow on like your car or on areas on the outside, that's the pollen. A lot of that pollen is being distributed and dispersed by wind. Other ways, water. So when it rains, for instance, the water might knock this down and the water is going to make it run down the street or somewhere else. So pollen can be distributed through various water. Pollen can be distributed through gravity. So gravity is the force that brings you down. So if the flower is up in a higher location, gravity will cause it to drop, and it could drop onto other flowers. One of the main ways that pollen is distributed, and what we refer to again as pollination, is by animals. Flowers are not just the way they look because we humans like it. Yes, we like flowers, but they're not here because of us. Flowers have adapted. They have changed what they are and what they look like and what they do for survival. So flowers have created beauty on themselves, these different colors to make themselves attractive. So that if I'm the bee or I'm this butterfly or some of our other pollinators, I am attracted to this flower and I'm going to go to this flower because it looks really beautiful. Watch the video that I attached to here as well for more information about how bees are working. So the bee or the butterfly is going to fly here and they're going to take the nectar and they're so good. And then they're going to go to the next flower. And so he comes over here and he gets the pollen. And have you ever seen a bee? A bee has like little legs and the pollen gets stuck on the legs and it's like attached. And he's grabbing the nectar and he's floating to the next flower. Well, when he does that and he comes to the next flower, that pollen from this flower is stuck to his legs and the pollen's going to fall into the stigma. And that pollen's going to travel down the style and then travel down to here into our ovaries where it's waiting to create a seed. Once that pollen from the bee or the butterfly or any of our other pollinators fall into the stigma and come here, this is where the seed is now produced. And that's when we get to the next stages of the flower. So, pollination, these animals are helping the flower pollinate. Again, watch the videos, which are going to give you a little bit more information to help describe how the flowers are being pollinated. Pollination, again, is really important for our cycle of the flower. So, we will continue the next video about a little more beyond the pollination. So again, watch the videos below for more information about our pollinators, remembering how the pollen's job, pollination is about getting the pollen from the male part, the stamen, into the female part, the pistil. All right, see you in the next video.